I gotta say, this is the quietest group I've seen all day. Everyone's been sitting for like 5 minutes. Is everyone awake? Alert? Alive? All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. It just hit 14:30, so let's get moving forward. First and foremost, thank you very much for coming to this. Is Dark Entry, How Adversaries Slip Past Army Cyber Defenses. It's an Army-centric conference, so don't take it personally. It really is just DoD and government writ large, but we're gonna pick on Army because that's the week. Panelists with me, I'm Dr. Paul Lilly, please just call me Paul. First, sitting right there, that is Ms. Catherine Wang, goes by Kat. Next to her, we have Lieutenant General Jason Evans, retired. And then on the far end, we have Ashley Jansen. Each one of us is going to be talking pretty much throughout the entire group. Feel free to ask questions midstream. You don't have to wait till the end, although we're going to try and save some time, some room for questions at the end. Because in the end, what we're really looking for is discussion. And some of us have had various discussions over the past weeks leading up to this point. But to sort of lay things out, I know that several of you were here last year, and we had a similar panel. We talked about some things that were almost a bloody nose to a lot of us in government and a lot of us in the cyber community when it comes to intrusions. So I did want to hit a couple of those just in the beginning before we really jump into things to update where some things sit. And then I know a couple of the panelists want to jump in on a few topics. But when we talk about persistent threats, oh, by the way, we're not going to be reading slides to you. We assume that if you made it here to this room today, you somehow knew how to read. So go for it. We're going to be just talking around the topics. But two of the things I want to hit, because it's very recent. We had China tell us just a few weeks ago, they always blame us. We did something, even if we didn't. But they now have the ability for years to get into our systems. Well, this is something most of us have known for years. And this is an OT intrusion aspect of how they can gain access into our systems. The government spent billions of dollars on control modules and units that we know has Chinese firmware that has hidden SSIDs, hard-coded usernames, passwords, and the like. I don't blame the companies who manufacture these because they're victims just like everyone else. And I've heard a number of people talk about that concept of we need to be careful of looking for blame. We need to look for solutions. Just after saying this, we find out what were they doing. They were crawling through our water systems and our power systems and making changes and just basically showing us, hey, we weren't lying, we can do this. These are some of the challenges we were talking about last year as well. We were talking about the control systems specifically, the FG and FS32 boards, as well as we were talking about the 100,000 plus counterfeit TVs that the DoD purchased over the past 7 years that contain Bad Box 2. Since then, for those of you who read Wired, you know there's an article in Wired that Lily Newman did on that aspect, working with two of the companies I was working with, Google and Human at the time, when we discovered this 3 years ago, when we first brought it to the attention of the DoD. To date, nothing has happened. Those counterfeit devices with Bad Box are still in the hands of government writ large, let alone DoD, and they're on our systems every day. These are pervasive problems. These are challenges that we deal with, but there are other persistent issues. We start talking about persistent issues, we talk about how do people get in. One of those is firewalls. We think about firewalling. First, how many of you have heard of the Purdue model? If I say OT and Purdue model, only a handful of people. If you haven't heard of the Purdue model, I'm going to encourage you to look that up at some point. Because ideally, in a crowd, cyber people these days, everyone should know exactly what it is, especially since the DoD adopted that as its model. Now, the Purdue model basically is the top two tiers sits your IT systems you're all familiar with. That's where most of us have lived our entire careers. Then there's this beautiful little firewall area. And then there's your SCADA systems, which is your building control type aspects in your control systems. And then everything all the way down to zero, which is your sensor systems. Now, the intrusion aspects I've been talking about with the control boards sit down at the very bottom. They're literally at the sensor level. I can enter there and then as a trusted device, make it all the way through because your firewall is not protecting you from the inside. It's not protecting you from a mouse or a keyboard, or in this case, the control unit that maintains your HVAC system or your access control. In fact, it encourages it to communicate. The fact that it's transmitting a lot of additional data, most of us don't see that. Now, there's other aspects that I know, Ashley, you had a few things on.
Thank you, Paul. So I'm coming to this from the facility side of things. I run teams at installations that primarily do UMCS support, so control systems and different controls projects. And and it's absolutely what Paul was talking about, where we're seeing problems are where systems like buildings may go offline and we don't know, or there are things online that are not picked up in the UMCS system. And what I'm seeing again and again when I have RFIs come out and they're saying, come do an OT inventory, don't look at sensors and actuators. You can just start at the control level on up. You're not safe. So we can perform that cyber security OT inventory for you, but that isn't going to ensure safety. And again, you can have your safe areas, your critical infrastructure that is locked down, but you're still going to have your pools, your theaters. We've even seen a breach in an irrigation system. So it is a widespread problem.
Good,
So,
yeah.
okay.
I appreciate it. Actually, one of the things that Ashley said earlier to me when we were talking, she said, one of the biggest problems with people relying on firewalls, they forget the number one protection we can have, the best firewall we can have is good training. It's not just training of those of us who are cyber professionals, which is why I wanted Ashley specifically on the panel, and of course the other two, because they're amazing. But she brings a very different perspective to this. When we think of OT intrusion, we think of cyber, we think in our little box. We can't do that. We have to think in terms of your HVAC techs. We have to think in terms of your electrical engineers, your mechies, your people who work in facilities. And I know General Evans will be talking about the whole FRIX concept and how all of this ties together because it is a complete total cyber problem for us. Now, am I saying that we want to relegate responsibility to DPW or anyone else? No, they don't own cyber. But do we have to make sure that the people who are going to interface with sensors, SCADA systems, and any of these have the training to understand why it's so critical and why you can't bring a building online until it's properly vetted and secured, why that's so important? That has to happen. And inversely, on the cyber side, for those of us cyber professionals, we have to understand those other challenges too. Because we're not just dealing with, we're going to give you a whole lot of scary things that other people are trying to do to us or actively doing to us. But what scared me the most, and I'm going to pick on you one more time,
Yeah, let's do it.
was your son's school.
Oh, yeah. So again, I can bring some real world examples to you. So in March, in Pennsylvania, there was a catastrophic transformer failure that took out the power in a Pennsylvania town and college for about 24 hours. The college went to backup power to generators, and the generators were overloaded, and it led to a rise in carbon monoxide, and kids were taken to the hospital. Fortunately, everyone was okay, but when we talk about OT failure, this is what we're talking about. People can die. And so think about that on your force projection platforms. Think about that on your installations, that when OT goes wrong, it can go very wrong.
Yeah, and that also leads to, when you're thinking of OT failures, think of a SCADA system that goes down, doesn't properly maintain those systems.
That's right.
You're not even going to know that you may have something going on. Now, at 7 o'clock in the evening or afternoon, however you look at it, it's college, so I call it afternoon, but it's not as big an issue. A lot of kids went to the hospital. If that had been 3 o'clock in the morning, we'd have several hundred dead children. I know they're in college, but they're still children to me. Imagine that on one of our bases. If a SCADA failure occurs and we don't have the ability to know what occurred because we don't have the right tools. Now, this is where we talk about not just having good hardware, we also need good software monitoring. And we talk about software monitoring, the first thing you hear is about knock and sock dashboarding and dashboarding in general. There's so many different dashboards we all have to use for so many different things, and we're overloaded with a ton of information. And most of that information is frankly useless to us, unless I need something. Then I want to be able to go in and find it. But what I want to do is I want to know, this building disappeared, by the way, and hasn't come back online. Or, hey, there's these 15 new things I've never seen before. Or, hey, there's this new threat and how to deal with it. And I need to know that. So there's the software component of it. Now, can I just go out and buy, and I'm going to pick on Forescout because I know they're somewhere outside the door. Can I just go buy Forescout and call it a solution? Well, they're a great solution. I use them in a number of places. They're used by the military. Dragos, Clarity, all great solutions. But they're not a one-stop shop. They'll even tell you that. Not a one-stop shop. Sandbox AQ has an amazing product for dealing with seeing encryption end-to-end and a great dashboard. Is it a one-stop shop? Of course not. This is where having good software tools and having good hardware tools, but having us trained is really the critical issue.
Yeah.
One other point about the tools that I would say, in addition to secure by design, let's not have all of our eggs in one basket, is also making sure that we're not letting whatever AI or intelligence platform that is supposed to be raising the top priority things dictate everything that we look at, right? I don't want a system telling me what is priority all the time. I want to be able to dig into the data and say, it's interesting that this building no longer exists in my purview anymore. What happened? So having the people that are properly trained to understand what to look for and have the headspace to be able to look for it, in addition to some of the systematic alert fatigue reduction from automated systems, is important.
Perfect. Ashley, did you have one?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to, as far as, DPW is out there doing hard work, good work. These are good people, but they have not been trained. So part of what my teams are doing are working with DPW, providing training, but I see that I can see what's coming, what's already here, and we need more. We need to go further. So I'm looking at building this next gen of HVAC technicians, mechies, EEs, that understand how to interact with the systems that we have in a safe and secure way. Also, Paul, I would just want to add on that it goes even further than that. You need KOs that understand the gravity of the situation. Not to name names, there's a base that has a subcontractor that again and again and again gets work, performs installations incorrectly, and incorrect installation is a beautiful entry for a breach. And so my team is going behind and correcting the work. And everyone knows that the subcontractor is a problem, except for evidently the contracting office, who is looking at, this is the cheapest price or whatever. We have some new barracks that just came online. The controllers were installed improperly. And the KO would just like to sign it off. He's on a timeline, and once those buildings, he wants to be able to sign off that they're done. They're not done. So we need to take this seriously, and everybody needs to understand their role in being cyber secure.
And to that point, exactly, we're talking trusted devices, which is what all of those various devices that are installed incorrectly are. If they're installed incorrectly, we're just giving easy vectors now for enemy. It's hard enough when we already know they've infiltrated through a number of ways, when they're actively trying. I heard someone earlier say they don't even have to really give us their A game right now. They can just sort of play the field, because we as the US aren't participating in the cyber battle space. In fact, the concept of cyber battle space is almost a new term these days. And it's fascinating to me, because I know there's a number of folks probably in this room who you've been in that battle space for decades. But you've been alone in that battle space and trying to, shout into the wind about how we need to take this as seriously as possible. And I recognize that, because we have some amazing people who do this work every day throughout all of government, let alone just the military and especially the Army. And to be the tip of the spear, that tip of the spear also needs to be protected. And if we can't open our doors because the trusted systems fail, if the power grid goes down on a facility and installation, if the water system goes down, that's horrible. But if we do that to an entire city, if we do that to the eastern seaboard or the whole country, that's a whole different set of problems. They used to say that an army fights on its stomach, and that's a true statement. But no one can fight abroad if they can't know their family's safe at home. So the easiest way for an enemy to attack us, it's not kinetics, it's through the cyber battle space. If they come in that way and they attack us and they shut us down there, they win, and they win very quickly. And that's one of the scariest aspects of knowing all of these different challenges. And there's a couple of them that are listed. 2 I already hit because they're from previous years that I talked about. Obviously, I'm sure everyone's heard about the inverters at this point. I think 10 different people have talked about the Chinese inverters with the solar panels. There's a lot of internet cameras. DHS did some. Last year, CISA had a warning about a number of different challenges. And I know DIS have validated some of those internally. So there's every other day, there's some new thing we hear about. If you follow any of these magazines, these resources, you hear about all these new things. But remember, it doesn't just have to be a nefarious act. It can be not installing them correctly that could cause the same problem. And it's us, that same system we're using to look for problems nefarious, we can also head off some of these potentially life-saving head off for some of these non-enemy state attacks. One of the things I wanted to hit also was encryption. Encryption's a fascinating topic because for time immemorial, we've always tried to hide communications from our enemies and from our adversaries, and we've become quite good at it. But these days, with AI and with quantum on its way, we know that that's not as easy as it used to be. And there's also a lot of trade-offs. Sometimes you can crack something like Enigma. After they cracked it, most of you have heard of Coventry. It's potentially a myth, potentially real. But basically, Churchill had to make a decision. We cracked Enigma. We know they're going to bomb Coventry. Do we let them destroy Coventry and kill all those people? Or do we keep it a secret and not do anything? Because if we stop them, then that means they know we cracked Enigma and they'll find something else. Churchill chose not to. He chose to let Coventry fall. Right or wrong decisions up to history. But those are the decisions that our leaders are faced with every day when it comes to encryption. But the challenge now is it's not one set. It's not one thing. It's thousands of different things. And Kat, I know you have some things on this.
Yeah, so I think we all have heard the challenges around OT in particular and any type of intrusion, right? So if we look at some of the hardware that's trojanized or that is counterfeit coming out of Shenzhen, China, there's too many to note, right? We have tracked Sony Bravia TVs that are counterfeit, that are built in Shenzhen, China, and then purchased at suspiciously low prices at Amazon, then shipped out to military bases all over. And you know what? If I throw up a little ping out there on the NetFlow traffic, you know where a lot of them are coming from? Where? Smart TVs, exactly. We got a winner up in front. And they're specifically in Kaneohe Bay, one of the first places that are going to respond should we see a geopolitical conflict between China and Taiwan. Right? They're not stupid. PRC has utilized the fact that America has been cheap. Actually, the rest of the world has been cheap for decades now, created a manufacturing powerhouse and then systematically weaponized that to find their way into our homes, into our secure military facilities. So even if we were able to, and I mean maybe, right? Even if we were able to get all of the OT remediation done today, even if we were able to do that, there's no way that we could secure the supply chain until at least a decade from now. And even if all of that gets built in the United States, I would argue by zero trust principles, we should still stress test it because we've seen multiple instances where the PRC has straight up bought American businesses operated on American soil with their mission in mind. So when all other cyber defenses fail, cryptography is what's going to keep them from decrypting a lot of our sensitive information for our high value assets. And you know what? It doesn't even take quantum computing to crack our shit. You can do it with classical computing if you're using vulnerable cryptography. And on top of that, if we find that this particular algorithm is vulnerable, how long is it going to take for us to switch them out? How long is it going to take for us to switch out the wrapper on that burrito? And do we even know where all of that sits, right? So for many reasons, being able to get visibility into where those assets live and then what is touching those assets, both human and non-human, has to happen while we're remediating all the OT stuff.
Okay. I love it. I especially love the vulgarity. It really sends it home. It's the best part of it. Keeps everyone awake. Now, we've pointed out a lot of issues. At the end of the day, though, realistically, fighting back is, I wanted to put something in there that was, I want to say positive, but really more of what do we need to do? Now, we've got a few more slides, but in reality, we're talking about what we need to do. It's common sense to most people in the room, right? We need to do our assessments, we need to do remediation, but we also need to train the people. When I look at the people who are charged right now with maintaining OT, if I ask any of you if you've had a 2-week certification course that trained you in the types of equipment, tools, and software, and the framework to know how to use that, not just for assessment remediation, but for ongoing, the answer is no, because it doesn't exist right now. Now, there are plans to create centers of excellence. There's plans to create some of these programs, but they don't even exist in the civilian world, let alone here in the military world. So this is new. And one of the things I want to say, part of our fighting back, a part of tightening cryptography and all of these wonderful things, it's training, but it's also looking at how we look at finding these problems. I've told you we have all these issues and these open doors in these facilities, these installations, buildings that we have, But what do you think happens, especially for those of you in uniform? You already know the answer to this one, and those who've been in uniform. But if we find there's 10,000 vulnerabilities that China has access to installation X, who do you think looks at that commanding general and their staff? They're going to have JAG crawling through, figuring out who to prosecute, who did something wrong. Why did you miss this? Why did you miss something you had no possible way of knowing existed? Why did you miss something that no one has been trained to deal with or has the tools and equipment to deal with? Because the tools you have right now are not adequate. A lot of those tools are around you, but they haven't made their way fully integrated into our systems. So we need to look at this way we did pilots years ago. We were losing them left and right because of safety issues. And we were blaming them because of all kinds of failures. We were blaming maintenance people, all kinds of failures, rather than looking holistically and saying, hey, let's identify the problem, identify the challenge, where's the training need, fulfill that, and then move forward. But if we don't do that, then you end up with a lot of people who just try to protect their lives and their jobs rather than doing really what's right, because they don't have a choice. We need to take that away. We need to take that choice away and make it so everyone's incentivized to find the problem. We know they're there. There isn't a person who's in this room who doesn't realize that this is a pervasive issue. That's why every OT panel I've seen has standing room only. It ends up with people coming in and out because they'd like to sit down. It's not because we're all great. We are, yeah. But at the end of the day, it's because we all recognize this is the bigness. This is the big challenge in front of us. This is how our enemy will exploit us. Hell, this is how we've exploited some of our enemies. This is how very recently over in Ukraine, they exploited the Russians to turn one of the manufacturing facilities into slag. This is how we stopped the Iranians years ago, almost over 10 years ago now, an OT attack to turn one of their facilities into slag, to delay their weapons manufacturing. It wasn't kinetics, it was OT. So fighting back is definitely something we need to look forward to. And I did want to say, because a lot of you have heard, CISA came out with a very neat document, Foundation for OT Cybersecurity Asset Inventory Guidance for Owners and Operators. It's very good. I have to pick on it because I love CISA. They're good folks, but I have to pick on it. Any sort of assessment model that doesn't include remediation isn't going to serve your purpose. It has to include remediation, first and foremost. Second, if you are doing singular inventories, you're wasting your time. I've fed this into various AIs because why not? Everyone does. And I said, what would be a good output for this? What can I do with this? How should I utilize this? And every one of them gave me an Excel spreadsheet and said, fill this out. Do a physical inventory. Now, when you're doing manual inventories, that's really good. That's called a double check with what we do. We first want to do an inventory of the system and get our diagrams through some sort of software, then go validate and also physically touch everything on a shelf. But once you have that inventory, it has to be a living inventory. If you're not looking at these systems every day, which is why I like some of the software that sits around us, if you're not looking every day to see what's changed, what's been altered, or what's failed, then this doesn't help you. Now, this is a great start. I do say it's a great start. I have some closing the gaps. We will provide some slides, by the way, because I know I do move a little quickly on some of these. But do have a number of different ways you can close the gap if you're asked to use this. I would encourage everyone to just take sort of a holistic look at it and say, yeah, but what about cryptography? Yeah, what about dynamically looking at our systems? What kind of software do I have? What kind of wire diagramming am I doing? A lot of the systems do that for you. It becomes very simple. It takes minutes. From the moment you plug a lot of these various pieces of hardware in, their software does a lot of this for you, and it's already approved. Not a sales pitch, because I don't work for any of them, but it is in an overarching framework. That overarching framework is the one thing that's missing from here, and that's how to do assessment to remediation to operations. And it has to be all the above, because if I come in and I fix your facility, I find everything, give you an inventory, and I fix it, the next day someone goes and changes out a thermostat, you're broken again. You have to know real time what's going on, which means training, training, and training. Enabling capabilities. Again, when we talk about how to do things, I've had people ask me what are some various software. So I put some of those up here so you have an idea. These are just different bits of software I've seen as I've gone around, not affiliated. Don't care if you buy any of it. I do know people at all these companies, but that doesn't mean anything. At the end of the day, though, I do suggest if you're not looking holistically, if you're not looking at how you're going to manage your threat intelligence and how you're going to manage just incidents and accidents, then that's going to cause failure for you. And why is this important? Why am I so scared about OT beyond this? Is because we have a new mission coming. I mean, who here hasn't heard of Golden Dome? Anyone? I mean, everyone knows Golden Dome, right? That is the new mission mindset for all of us. And I love the idea. The idea is great. But if you can't fire your countermeasures, if you can't track anything, what's going to happen? Kat?
You've got a big OT sandwich right there on that Golden Dome situation. That's what's going to happen.
You do. Please.
So I think putting it very plainly, a lot of the vulnerabilities that we're talking about today indicate one thing. The DoD is a living, breathing organism, right? Get the MRI. Once you have the MRI and you know where the cancer is, then you can do something about it. You can go ask for the money that you need to, and we need to embrace that blameless culture. Public sector is a little bit harder with that. I would say private sector, we tend to embrace that a little bit more. We focus on the solutions as opposed to the blame, and we move on. But if we think about all of the OT vulnerabilities on the bottom, right, where the defense industrial base, where the operators and the technology and core for Golden Dome sits, and then we have everything in between, and then you have the sensors at the top, the satellites in the sky that we literally can't access, right, without touching it. If we don't have some of the benefits, the knowledge of where we didn't anticipate new vulnerabilities to exist going into building Golden Dome, it's effed, right? So I had talked to another solution provider, and they were able to get to impact level 5 within a matter of weeks. And I asked them, how the hell did you do that? I'm like, well, it helps not having 10 years worth of technical debt. What that says is, as we're building new innovative technologies, finding new ways to secure the national security of the United States, let's take some of the learnings that we know from all the challenges we have right now, secure that layer, build it into the future that we're trying to implement.
Perfect. Perfect segue into the last slide. I appreciate it. So the Golden Dome risks, you hit all the key points. And when we talk about the challenges and risks, when we're looking at anything new like this is the next new program. There'll be, 5 more within the next 10 years, I'm sure. And we'll all be told to focus on that. But in the end, the core is we have to maintain that level of training. We have to maintain the ability to be ahead of our adversaries. Right now, we're behind right now. We're behind China. We're behind a number of other folks because we haven't focused on it enough. It's not a failure of the people in this room. We know it's a failure of leadership. That's unfortunate. There's a lot of ways of fixing that. Thankfully, it is being taken seriously. I can say I've been working with 8 different members of the House. I'll be testifying before HASC, September, October. They come back from their vacation soon, and they'll do their scheduling, and I'll get on the schedule. But, and I look forward to that, being able to talk very openly and publicly about some of the challenges we faced, some of the issues and the pushback we've received when actually fixing the problem. Because it does take, in many cases, someone from that level saying, hey, no, this isn't a blame game. This is about fixing things. This is about making sure that the warfighter is properly equipped. And that means that their family's taken care of and that they are fed, that they have the right things they need from a cyber and OT protection perspective. It's also crucial that we look toward NDAA, and I'm not going to foot stomp too much because I know the general is going to talk about that, but looking toward the new NDAA that's coming out. I was very fortunate to work with Speaker Johnson's group, and 9 of the 14, I'm sure there's going to be more changes, came directly from conversations with him and things that I asked for. And what I asked for was teeth. And I asked for teeth because we need the ability to do remediation, which means the ability to identify a training need and force the training need down, because that's the only way we're going to solve any of these problems. Now, without me taking too much more of that time, General Evans.
Thanks, Paul. So I'm going to come at this a different angle, because I think what you've heard is symptoms and outcomes from not maintaining an aggressive strategy in terms of facility-related control systems. If you look at recent legislation as far back as FY17, the legislation has focused on protecting critical infrastructure. In FY17, cyber assessments were conducted in the Army. And I'm here to root for my service because I will tell you that the framework and strategy has been in place now for a while. I've served at the garrison level, I've served at the MCOM level, and my culminating assignment was the Army G9, where we had oversight and budget portfolio for the 141 approximately installations. And so to talk about this like this is something new, that's not. We did a subset. When I say we, the Army did a subset as a result of NDA 17 directing. This is congressionally mandated. The current strategy is rooted in a congressional mandate. And so when you have an NDA, what does that mean? When it's enacted, what does that mean? That means it's law. So we did that subset And that subset really focused on critical infrastructure control systems. Now, you got the 5 categories that Paul talked about. And so why are we talking about installations? For the Army, those are power projection platforms and mobilization force generation installations. And what does that mean? That's how you get to the fight. What's the impact of that? The impact of that is mission assurance, your risk management framework, the ability to operate operations, and secondary to that is quality of life and family readiness. How many people have been on an installation with no power for a week? So, and right now I'll tell you, a lot of those occurrences, we can almost predict it because what happens when they're in hurricane season? Right, but when you're talking about infiltrating control systems, now you have the enemy inside the control system turning off and on and manipulating at will. Right now we have that, and we can see some of that coming. I know Fort Gordon had an issue last year with the weather and power, right? So the Army had a strategy, and that strategy was to inventory, cyber assessment, mitigation, and continuous monitoring. There was an Army XOR published then that went down to the units, to the operational tactical, to do the same thing. I will think you'll see a lot of activity now, that inventories are being done, and I think installations are mitigating to the point where they can mitigate. Now, was this all resourced maybe at the installation level? No, because landowners, the landowning commanders, as they mitigate, they had to spend their own money. But as a comment was made earlier, DPWs are not cyber experts. And at the time they did do in FY17 a subset, there were on record hundreds of thousands of other control systems that were unconstrained. And at that time, we committed to doing at least 8 assessments a year. Now we fast forward to NDA FY22. And what do you think that said? Conduct the assessments. It's resourced at the strategic level. So that not necessarily is an issue. So I will tell you, all of the framework and strategy of the symptoms that you heard are there. We just need to get it done. You need to get the cyber assessments done for a number of reasons. Best practices, mutual aid agreements with the community, because the cyber or control system issues on installation, not just the installation's problem, it's the community problem too. And I don't know how many mutual aid agreements garrison commanders or senior commanders have now that even address cybersecurity. Normally they address fire, emergency, and that kind of thing. But all the makings are here. What we have to do is get on with the strategy. You have to have it before I left at G9, we stood up the Army Control System Governance Office. It's resourced. That's an important part of driving the strategy down to the operational and tactical level to get the things done that need to be done. You need, in my mind, the continuous monitoring provides feedback to the Army senior leadership in terms of defense critical assets and tactical critical assets, as well as others, and how to prioritize that. But I would say that, when you look at a number of, the power projection platforms and mobilization force generation platforms, is probably about 20%. And you should at least prioritize getting the cyber assessments, getting the mitigation in, and doing the continuous monitoring for that. So my thing is I'm here to cheerlead for my service because I know since at least 17 there's been a framework for the strategy. My thing is you need some bold initiative, and you need to be aggressive to execute the strategy, because this is real when you're talking about facility-related control systems and the potential impact that it could have even from in deployment from port to port. It could significantly limit the ability to do that for one of the power projection platforms. And some installations serve as both a power projection platform and a mobilization generation force installation. And so it's critical that we get on with it. I think the NDA FY23, again, when you look at that, it's talking about how to mitigate facility-related control systems and setting up a taxonomy for, but it wants the services to get after this problem because it is critical infrastructure and it can cripple your ability to project force, as well as the secondary effect of the quality of life and family readiness of those folks on an installation.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I got nothing to add. I got nothing to add to that one. Usually I do, but it is one of those things where we've been living this for quite a while, trying to get some of this moving forward. And it's interesting because one of the things that has occurred to me, and I'm going to give them a few moments before I ask each one of them for sort of their closing thoughts before we move into questions. So that's kind of a warning, by the way, because I didn't tell them I was going to do that. But one of the things that occurs to me as we're looking at all these problems is I always like having one belly button to push for a problem. It doesn't matter if I'm hiring a contractor to do something at my house or it's working with whoever, the government working with a contractor, whatever. You want one belly button to push. The biggest problem I have in cyber, or just OT in general, but cyber is a great one, is who's the belly button? Who do you push on? And if I look at the government writ large, who do I push on? It's not CISA. It's not their job. Who is it? Do we have one belly button? The answer is no. If you look government-wide, the answer is no. There isn't some secretary level that deals with cyber, that has an agency that deals with it as a whole, and then flows that information into all others. From the DoD, if I ask the same question, I guarantee I'll get 10 different answers. Some will be CIOs, some will be other folks, some will be cybersecurity lead. I mean, someone may even say Dr. Tahoe, who's amazing and incredible, and one of the brightest people I've seen in DoD in a long time. But many of you aren't even going to know who she is. And it's one of those scenarios where you look at these people and you go, well, who is the belly button to push? Who's the right agency to run it? In the Army, is it Arc Cyber? I don't know. I mean, is their mission set? Yeah. But when we start looking at everything, and for those of you who used to watch The Simpsons years ago, there was this episode where they said the trash men will do it. Homer became mayor, go figure. And it was no matter what you needed, the trash men will do it. And the whole system collapsed. Well, we can't do that to Arc Cyber. We can't do that to CIO Shop. But we can do that if we create a cyber entity that's across all DoD platforms and that has flow down into those various divisions, whether it's Army, Navy, Air Force, doesn't matter. And if we don't do that, if we don't take it that seriously, then we're pretty much in a lot of trouble. Now, I know we've tried doing that in some ways. The CIOs have been a great example of that. But again, now we're talking about authority. I can give people responsibility. If I don't give them authority and budget, then it's pointless. Everyone in this room has been given a responsibility to do something, but you've had no authority to do it, and you definitely hadn't had the budget, but you still were told, get it done. Some of you made it happen somehow, and others, you couldn't because it was impossible. I remember a few years ago when I was in the chem bio world, we had to get all this equipment to Korea. We had no possible way of doing it. So I called up a friend of mine at Air National Guard in New York, and I said, you guys need some time with one of your C-17s, right? I said, can you do a mock mission to Korea? I need to put some stuff on that plane. And that's how we got it all there, because we couldn't afford to pay for it. So we had to use a training mission to get equipment to Korea. Now, I can't tell you when this was, but it was an issue. We needed that chem bio equipment there. We needed all of it there. And we literally had to beg, borrow, and steal to get it done. That shouldn't happen. And I know there's a lot of people in the room who are nodding and smiling, going, yeah, I've done crazy shit like that too. Because you have to get your job done. We can't do that in the cyber world. We can't beg, borrow, and steal. We actually have to have a mandate, a mission, which we have. We have to have the authority and the budget. So those are sort of my closing thoughts before we'll open questions. But let me start with Ashley. Words of wisdom.
Okay, as I've been sitting here, I've been thinking, the FBI down at Redstone Arsenal has stood up a cybersecurity working group for companies that work with military, with government. When they have cybersecurity issues, there is a way to talk about problems in a non-attributable way. So they are sharing information and problem solving together in real time. And what we need is why we need these assessments, why we need this inventory is so that we understand what we have and we can communicate that effectively. When we see something go down, like Paul said, I don't want to see a single software solution. That's a terrible idea. Use Johnson Controls, use Honeywell, use all the different manufacturers, the different software, but we need to know who has what where. And when an issue arises, we need to know how many places that is effective and how can we quickly get out to you, quickly deploy a solution. So that's the importance. It's being able to respond in a timely manner. And I think that there are some things on the horizon where we can see that we cannot become complacent, and we need to be ready to act when called upon. So those are my thoughts.
Perfect. General Evans.
So I would just say that in any strategy, you have to clearly define roles, responsibility, and governance. I think in the Army's case, that has been done. I think it's now time, we've been doing this since about NDA 17. You had NDA 22 say, get on with it, get it done, and now we got NDA 23. If you look at any one of those three, the theme is clear. What Congress is mandating that we do. We have the end ways and means to execute that. There may be some challenges at the installation level, but you won't know till you do the assessment. Because the installations, you need to know where the weaknesses are, what resources they need. But from a strategic standpoint, the resources are there to conduct the strategy so that you can get to inventory, you can get to cyber assessments, you can get to mitigation, and you can get to continuous monitoring.
So Paul knows I like to tell stories. How many of y'all were in my session this morning? Okay, a few. Good to see you. Thanks for coming out. You guys heard this one Wired article? Came out on August 6th. Hackers found a way to utilize Google Gemini to exploit just plain text in a Google Calendar invite that had malicious code in the description. And through that code, they were able to intrude into the smart home, turn off the lights, open the windows, and turn on the broiler. I just attacked your home. I also, at the last DEF CON, watched one of my white hat hacker friends hack into an insulin pump. Anyone want to guess how long it took her? 8 minutes. I just hacked your body. And when we think about the amount of the correlation between economic security and national security, this is not my words, this is Director Christopher Wray's words from the FBI, former director. He said, China has amassed more of our intellectual property than any other nation state combined. I just hacked your money. So we hacked they hacked our money and our bodies and our homes, right? Because of this foundational layer of intrusion, specifically operational technology that we did not see coming. Please consider prioritizing that assessment, get that MRI, figure out what we're fighting with, and then we start the clock.
Excellent. I love that example, by the way, being able to hack in. The white hat hacking world is amazing because we really do find vulnerabilities. I'd say the 8 minutes is a long time compared to doing a lot of things in government. And I have to take the opportunity because it's not to pat myself on the back. It's more of what scared me is about a month ago, I was asked by one of a mutual customer for Intrepid Partners, so I work for. It was a government customer, and they had someone die, and this person was the single point of failure for access to a database system. It was an old database system, but they were the single point of failure. It was encrypted, and everything was locked down, and they haven't been able to get into it for about a year and a half. And they really need this data and this information. It's the kind that if they lose, it's a public health type thing, that it could actually be an issue. And so they were asking, and I said, well, if you hired anyone or asked anyone to just hack into it to crack through the encryption. And they said, no, that's expensive. I said, well, can you send it to me? And let me take a look. I'll give you an idea how much I think it'll cost. So they emailed it to me. That's how small the file was. And we're sitting there talking, and they said, how hard do you think it'll be? I said, I just finished. Here's your data. And I sent it all back to them. It took under 30 seconds. I didn't use any fancy tools. I didn't have to. It was just knowing how to get into things. Instead of going through the encryption side, which is kind of hard, instead of going through trying to look for the little key notations and all of the little dots and dashes that exist when you start looking at things, it was pointless. I didn't need to do that at all. I created a data dump. I looked at the dump file, and I looked for the thing that said password equals. Copy, paste, done. I was in. That's it, a data dump.
You did charge them for that though, right?
No,
That's an opportunity missed.
no, because I'd really rather get the opportunity to fix the problem in the future. So it was just, I can't charge someone for 30 seconds. What am I going to charge for 30 seconds? Well, actually, I don't know. Maybe Intrepid did charge. I don't know. But at the end of the day, it's not because I was great. No, I just did something very simple that we teach people pretty much when you first start teaching white hat hacking. If any of you have been through a class, one of the first things they teach you is launch the executable and drop it. Basically calls it data dump. Take the output from that, look at the binary file, scroll through the various options for 6400, 32, whatever. Start scrolling through till things start looking like words. And then do a quick search. There's a couple of things, passwords, one of them, CAPTCHA. There's a bunch of little things you can look for that tell you it's a password. And usually it's something that makes sense. It's like Rover or something, their dog's name, or you look for things that would be normal passwords, especially for the average person. And if you're talking a few years ago, okay, well, it's government, so it's probably going to be a certain amount of characters. I know the agency, I know what they would have required. So you look for some of those things. So it doesn't take long. And if you can copy and paste that into an AI system and say, hey, find me, something that looks like a password, it sets out 10 of them or 20 of them. Copy, paste. Nope, that didn't work. Copy, paste. Hey, that one worked. And I ended up finding some other passwords that they were able to use to get into some other systems because they'd apparently changed their passwords a few times. I had all of them. So now they had the ability to get into other things they didn't think were as critical, but now they can get into them because they never changed those passwords. So they were some of the old ones. Because what do? We use the same password for everything. Shouldn't do that. But that's what a lot of people do, especially your non-techies. So it is an interesting endeavor. And I don't say that because it really is interesting when you think about hacking into something. It isn't hard to get into a lot of government systems, to get into them. And once you're in there, you can cause a whole lot of problem, especially in the areas we're not protecting in the OT space. Now with that, let me jump to question and answer. I promised I'd leave 15 minutes. I left you 14. Any questions, any obscenities, comments? Sir? Anyone on the panel? Because I have very pointed opinions on that one. I agree with you. It's worthless. And the reason I say that, no offense to anyone who believes in it, if there are exceptions and exemptions, it doesn't serve a purpose. And there has to be exceptions and exemptions because a lot of the small companies can't afford to go through these processes. And they just won't because they know you have to use them. I heard someone earlier today, I was in the speaker room, and she had a really good point. She said, if you're someone who makes this widget that the government needs, and you got a 100-year contract, and you're the only people who do it, and there's 5 of you, you're not going to go through the process because you don't need to. Now, do I think that having these types of things? Yes. Oh, definitely. We need to have ways of guaranteeing and making sure that systems are secure and that we're buying good supply chain and that we don't have vectors and entry points. But I think that it's very hard to just draw a line in the sand when I know there'll be a ton of exceptions and exemptions and that many of those will just cause big holes that will never get filled. So I would much rather see a more robust way of doing things that doesn't cost companies millions of dollars. Because in many cases, these are small mom and pop shops who cannot afford to do this because they can't add to their cost line. If they do, you'll go somewhere else to one of the competitors who's worth billions of dollars. Well, then we lose those small companies that actually created the widget you want or the software or whatever. So like I said, I have pointed opinions, so you're allowed to yell at me
Sorry,
Uh,
a good friend, feel free to take this. A good friend of mine calls that the cyber poverty line.
Yeah, there it is.
Cyber poverty line.
I want to tie into that real quick.
Please.
I think along the lines, it's a good first start.
Agreed.
Because I started going down it. I'll talk about educating people and training. Force everybody to go get CMMC compliant, period. It's the best door to open up anybody's eyes to understand exactly what they're facing down. And then showing up today, yeah, you notice, I never knew it about Jim and I getting hacked on August 5th until y'all presented it this morning. I've already been down a rabbit hole on that, walking around the deal. But I think it's advantageous because, it forced me to upgrade my network. Forced me to get, quarter-night federal firewalls, some of the best the small business can get to stay within my price point. But I think, especially with us, we're going for top secret clearance and everything else. And there's big boys out there that I'm fixing to be level 2 with a certificate, gone through the 110 audit, the body cavity search, whatever you want to have. And you got no names, but billion-dollar companies that it's not even on their radar yet.
And it's,
So I agree with you 100%, but I think forcing everybody to go through that exercise is at least a good start, and it's a
Agreed.
the door to your eyes and training that you really need.
and that's the true dichotomy that we have to work within. And ultimately, what my big complaint is, make it easier for the people. Not easy as far as, to comply, but make it cheaper. Make it so it's not so arduous for the smallest entities. And there are a lot of ways to do that. I've seen some proposals even from some of the larger defense contractors who are more than happy to even subsidize that. They're just not allowed to. And that's just foolish, when they want to help with small business because they want to get some small business credit for it. But nope, we don't want to allow that. Well, why not? Because it's not tied direct to a contract. So we cannot be victims of bureaucracy to the point that we close down all of our businesses. Because almost everyone who sits in this room, if you got a uniform, you're probably going to start a small business when you get out of it. That's just the way it tends to work. Or you're going to go work for a small business. I want that business to be there. I want that business to flourish because it's your ideas that are going to actually catapult us forward. And that's what we need. And that's not to mention the other people in here are small business. So, and the big businesses, I have nothing against them either. I'm a former Lockheed person. After I got out of Intel, that's where I went. And hey, great, I love them. I love the company they used to be, and I hear they're still a great company. But we have to be able to work within that framework. Now, I would say one of the other challenges with CMMC and some of these others is that is compliance going to be I've applied or I'm working in the process? And that's one of the directions it sounds like it may be going is people are going to be able to say, yep, I'm in the process. Well, how long are we going to allow someone to stay in the process before we cut that line? So again, I want to see great first start. I agree. Can't argue that. I just want to see it. I want to see something that moves forward and doesn't make it so arduous financially. That would be my point to it. Any other question about anything?
John Fund, Johnson Control. We're doing a lot of assessments this year for the services, just like you guys said, and we're seeing a lot of scenes. At the UBS we're seeing a lot of scenes that our adversaries are asking to exploit. Who is that one person in the Army that is in charge, to your point, that belly button that's in charge of facilitating control systems that have cognizance over critical functions within the Army?
Yeah, so the Army Control System Governance Office used to belong to the G9. My understanding now with the G9 going away, that's moved to the Army G6. So the assessments you're doing, are they cybersecurity assessments?
Yes.
On control systems?
On OT.
On OT?
Just OT.
So it's FRICS, facility-related control systems?
Some are, yeah.
Yeah, right, because I think the NDAA is clear about the assessments being cybersecurity in nature.
Yeah, they are.
Right.
The cybersecurity.
Right.
But the G6 has trouble influencing the land.
Well, so that's why I talked about strategy, roles, responsibilities, and governance, because in the Army, I think the responsibility would be whoever the functional expert command is to facilitate and execute the assessments, right? So you know what that command would be. But my point is to get the strategy moving, you need bold initiative at echelon, right? Here's what I think. I think the installations and senior commanders have been doing inventories. You know that. They've been inventory, but I think their mitigation in some cases I'm mitigating this control system because it's 95 degrees in the barracks. Right? So right. Right. So it's not, that's not, and they have a limited ability. There are some cyber hygiene things you can do and cyber protocols, things that they can do at their level, but you really need your functional experts to go down so you can do cyber threat illumination, so you can do the continuous mitigate, take offensive action to mitigate, and identify the cyber hygiene, because I think in some cases cyber hygiene when it comes to control systems is still an issue because you have control systems obviously hooked up to IPs.
Yeah.
The technical debt is so huge.
Right, right. And that's why I went back to NDA 17, because there was a subset done, and in 17, when those assessments were done, and you're saying you're doing it for services, but when I left in 22, there was still hundreds of thousands of unconstrained control systems that needed some kind of assessment. And the Army at that time in 17 had committed to doing, I think, 8 assessments a year.
Yeah.
And then the NDA 22 came and said, do assessments. And so I don't know that there's any evidence that those assessments have been done since that 17.
Overarching,
really?
you're
Overarching?
correct.
Yep.
But from a Johnson Control specific standpoint, I know you guys.
Not just ours.
Okay. And I did want to point out, because I did mention your company earlier, they're one of the victims. The FS and FG32 control boards from Johnson Controls. They were one of the victims where they had hidden SSIDs, username, hard-coded usernames, passwords. There were 5 different vendors who were victims in this, who didn't know they had Chinese firmware on a lot of devices. They've made efforts and they've, a lot of things fixed on their end. Some companies have, some haven't. But we need to be very careful looking at these companies and saying, hey, we recognize you're the victim too, and you're part of the solution. And that's the way it has to be. We have to look at these folks and recognize that they're also part of the solution set. It's the same thing. We can't just keep blame. We have to get in that culture of how do we do assessments? How do we find these things? And how do we work with those companies to help them with compliance, but also then work with them to actually make sure that they don't have a continued problem from a resourcing standpoint. And that goes back to, we have to look who our enemies are and make sure that we're not actually facilitating them being able to engage actively in that supply chain. Any other questions? Sir?
So, one thing I haven't heard you addressing here is the human problem. A friend of mine who's in the electrical power industry has told me off the record or privately and anonymously that his company is having a very difficult time finding parts like transformers without them being sourced.
Yeah.
And what he told me that was distressing was that it usually takes a week to a month before the new U.S. company that they're getting it from is bought and sold to some Chinese interest. So somehow those trades and those things are or would be regulated. Is there a solution to our problem, the human problem we have in OT cybersecurity here?
From the sense of foreign adversaries buying things up, if you were to ask me, it's prevent them from being able and allowed to do so. I'm a free market person, but I mean, at the same time, I own 20 acres in Florida. 95% of the offers I get for people to buy it, it's a Chinese entity. They want to buy them, all the property they can. And is that what we should be allowing? That's a discussion I know that's being had. Unfortunately, that's a discussion that Congress has to have. And they have to decide, is there a law? Do we need to prevent? I know some states are making some of those efforts, mine's one of them, where they're going to start preventing that, especially our agricultural property, and especially around military installations and other governmental facilities. Is it the right move? I don't know. I mean, your guess is as good as mine on that. I would say, though, that inaction isn't the action we need to take. And sourcing a material is a huge challenge. We don't make things here. We really don't. Now, I hear, Apple's putting $200 billion or whatever it is, or however much money into building iPhones or something in this country. Great. That's wonderful. Thank you. But where are the chips coming from? Are they still coming from overseas and it's being made here? If it's American made, what percentage of that can be still Chinese? Can it be 20%? Can it be 30%? 5%? Or 0? Where's that line? And how does that impact us? And they're not the only adversary. And they're not the only vector from an adversary. If you look what the Israelis did, the supply chain to blow up various radios and phones. These folks did not buy them from Israel, okay? So they obviously got into the supply chain. Well, it's nothing for a large government like China or any of our other adversaries who hate us to get into that supply chain. So how do we keep them out? Those are questions well above my pay grade. But I would say there are questions we need to keep asking until we find the right solution, because we can't just stick our head in the sand. We've done that too much in the cyber community. We can't continue to do that in these areas.
I would
Well,
also, please,
okay.
please.
I just wanted to foot stomp what you said. I've been working on a project actually that spanned over 3 years. It took us almost a year to get transformers. It's unreal. So it's absolutely a problem. And you're right, it needs to be addressed.
I would also encourage everyone to think about this from the international perspective, not just what we do not allow China to buy within the United States, is what other countries allow China to buy in their countries as well. So I don't know if anybody is following what is happening right now in Kenya. And I love the difference between media versus reality, right? In the media, it looks like China is coming in and investing in critical infrastructure for Kenya and turning it, this city, smart city first type of a innovation hub for the eastern seaboard within the continent of Africa. Sounds very exciting, right? But what happens when some kind of a geopolitical situation occurs and they need Kenya strategically, geographically to support them in whatever their mission objectives are? If Kenya says no, the PRC owns their entire flipping critical infrastructure. I'm trying so hard not to cuss right now, Paul.
I know. You're doing good.
Thank you. If this was Navy, then I'm just kidding. They're also set up shop in very strategic locations off the coast of the United States. Hi, Navy. Yeah, I got a smile from him. Off the coast of the United States for strategic surveillance purposes. And then this has happened numerous times over in the UK and in other Five Eyes allies. Like, it is a very dangerous game now that other countries are allowing this to happen, and they're desperate because they need money or they believe in free market. We need to think about all of those things, because just because it's not happening on our domestic soil doesn't mean it's not a threat to us.
Amen. I agree completely. Yes. We'll answer questions till they throw us out, by the way. So.
Marina Alvarez, recently retired from the State Department. On Capstone, Africa is known for its lack of bandwidth and infrastructure, and posts and embassies around Africa are limited, especially on the East Coast, or I guess West Coast of Africa, where the whole infrastructure is a 10 meg pipe. What happens with this invested in critical infrastructure upgrade, as Kat pointed out, not only an IoT, but PRC coming in and saying, hey, let us help you build your infrastructure. Tell me, how many of you guys overseas who have used the tailpipe from an embassy or a consulate to get your data across back to the US? How trustworthy would you feel if that PRC infrastructure is the only thing available to you, or you have a 10-minute time to go close?
So this is where we can get really creative, right? Like I take the term mad scientist with great pride. If we do our assessments and we figure out where all these vulnerabilities are, our knowledge becomes all of our collective knowledge with all of the bases that we have around the world. What then can we use that for from a bargaining standpoint to help upskill, up-level that country that we are in from a goodwill geopolitical aspect of it, right? So, okay, China comes in and they own the majority of the critical infrastructure for Kenya. But if we could do our part to create a lot of those ties, make them aware of those vulnerabilities, can we spy back? Can we be aware of the areas where we have vulnerabilities and use that for offensive hunting? Like, there are so many ways that we can think about this, but it starts with knowing what we don't know.
Agreed.
Outstanding. Any other questions, comments, obscenities? I mean, she's got plenty, but. All right. Any other closing thoughts? Otherwise,
Thank you all for
Good.
being here. Thank you for caring about this problem. We're
Yes.
here afterwards if you'd like to contact us or get copies of the slide. Thank you.
thank you so much.